Sure. Good afternoon to all of you in ISM. I am Deborah Augustus, the president of the organization for about another 30 days or so. I hope you are all holding up during this unprecedented time in our lives. It's been challenging at best, but finding your focus is a great way to relieve stress and anxiety. I'm happy you have found time to continue your learning journey with us, and we will get to that in just a moment. So first, let me tell you about a few of our upcoming events. We will be holding a three-part series with several panelists for each session. On May 21st, we will do part one of Coronavirus COVID-19, Perspectives for the Procurement Function. On June 4th, we'll follow that up with part two, focusing on resilience. And then on June 17th, there'll be part three, which we will focus on long-term strategies. On May 28th, we will be running Trends in Global Supplier Management with speaker Molly Latham from State of Flux. And then on June 3rd, we will have a best practice for creating a marketing spend category roadmap with speaker Kathleen Jordan from Concentric. Now I'd like to turn it over to Jeffrey Luft, who is our Director of Programs. Jeffrey?
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you, Kathy. Welcome all. I'll echo what Deborah said. I hope everyone is holding up. It's a beautiful day here in New Jersey. If you are local, hopefully you'll get out and enjoy some of the fresh air. We have a great speaker today. I've had the pleasure, unknowingly, of listening to her last week, so I know what you're in store for. Joanna Martinez is a speaker, a consultant, and an advisor. She has led transformations for businesses in various sectors, among them Johnson & Johnson, Diageo, Alliance Bernstein, and Cushman Wakefield. She has held client-facing roles, effectively giving her the chance to sit on both sides of the table. And along the way, she has negotiated more than hundreds and hundreds of agreements. She currently sits on the advisory board of the Rutgers School of Engineering. Her and her teams have been recognized for innovation or customer excellence by companies such as Determined, American Express, NGA, and Hubeline. And in 2019 and 2020, she was designated a top global influencer and thought leader in business culture, procurement, and supply chain by Thinkers 360. I'm going to give her a shameless plug because I had the chance to look at her book the other day, which is available as a Kindle book or on Amazon, A Guide to Positive Disruption, How to Thrive and Make an Impact in the Churn of Today's Corporate World. Joanna Martinez.
Thank you so much, Jeffrey. Let me screen share for a second here and make sure that we're all set. Give me one moment. Great. So thank you for that intro. It is funny, right? Jeffrey and I didn't know each other, and we wind up with, this is now our third interaction in 8 days. So it's funny how life, even when you are going nowhere outside the confines of your office, how things kind of shake themselves out. So I prepared this presentation because I am interested so much in this whole concept of how procurement is digitizing, the world is digitizing really, and procurement is, I get some great opportunity as a result of it. I am an engineer, proud graduate of Rutgers, as Jeffrey said, and I have this little mini resume here just because I wanted to give you a sense of the breadth of companies that I have worked for and the breadth of businesses. I may not have worked in your company, but I have acquired over time a sense for how these different businesses run. My stick, if you will, was that I could take good processes from one business and utilize them in another. So hopefully you'll see something on the list that you think is relevant. What I'm going to show you today is part of a project that I'm working on with a good friend of mine in the UK, Stephen Wills. You know, we're all here, and when you are a speaker, all of a sudden your speaking gigs just, you know, vaporize, or at least all get moved to October, and Stephen and I were getting requests from people for the same kinds of assistance. And so the two of us decided that we would spend this downtime and we would collaborate a little bit and pull together some online learning tools. We're probably a month away from that, at least, probably the end of June when they'll be ready. But I'm going to show you some bits and pieces of a few modules of that. You know, for those of you who have been doing category management came to be in the early 90s, right? The really good codified, here's how you do it, you know, here's how you approach procurement scientifically. Prior to that, I hate to say this, but the 3 martini lunch was alive and well. In fact, I will tell you that I was in New Jersey doing my first assignment. Actually, I was working part-time while I was finishing engineering school. And in the company I was working for, the entire procurement organization was in alcohol rehab. And that is the honest to God truth. So, you know, all of a sudden, this whole codification came to be about how you approach a category and what you do. And I think that has served us really well. For 30 years, you think about it, how many things are out there that work for 30 years? Now though, technology, I think it's giving us, I know, is giving us an opportunity to reset the bar. And as I speak, and Jeffrey's right, I do speak about change. I do speak about disruption. I went through a lot of disruption in my career and developed some ways to be not just someone who rolls with the punches when you're disrupted, but also someone who was a disruptor. And so I did write a book on that topic, and I believe that digitization is giving us an opportunity to create really good disruption for the companies that we work for. But we have to understand it first. And here's what would happen. I would speak and people would come up to me afterwards and say, you know, where do I go and how do I get some help understanding this? Because I really don't understand what blockchain is and whether it is of any benefit to me, or artificial intelligence, et cetera. And I was in a few situations where the teams, people would be asking, but the manager would be saying, no, that everybody understands it. And it was evident that that was not the case. So if nothing more, this is an interesting intellectual exercise for me as, you know, I'm you know, here quarantined just like everyone else is. So these are not, I'm not going to show you the entire modules, but my goal is to have you leave with a better understanding of blockchain, AI, and RPA. And then if time permits at the end, I'd like to show you how to put it all together and give you some ideas how, as a procurement professional, you can sort of prioritize what to be looking at and how you can bring benefit to your company. So first of all, we'll start with blockchain, right? So what is blockchain? A secure digital ledger of complete business flows using peer-to-peer networks that rely on smart contracts. Now, I don't know about you, but I know all those words. But when you put them all together, I still don't really understand what this definition means, right? So I have this definition that may be helpful for you. Okay, in the word blockchain, the block is the information, digital information. It's the date, the time, the digital signature, the approval, if you will, that says that this is good information. And what's the chain? It's the database, right? It's distributed across many computers, and it's the database upon which the block sits. So blockchain is digital information sitting on a public database. Okay? So a blockchain relies on cryptography, right? Which basically means that it takes the information, it uses cryptography to convert the data to a code, attaches that to the data and puts it in a chain of blocks, almost like a filing system, if you will, of information. And if someone tries to change it, a signal gets sent out to everyone in the network to let them know that. And that's why people say that it is unhackable, The fact that if a change gets made, everyone knows it. And if that change isn't authorized, people can stop it, okay? Only the full information resides with the owner. So that's really important in terms of kind of understanding where the safety and the security of blockchain is, okay? Now, let me give you this example. You're buying a home today, in today's world. What happens, right? You know that information about ownership, liens that may have been put on the house, mortgages, any kinds of fines that perhaps the community put on, you know, certifications on wells and water and things like that, all resides in a lot of different places. Sometimes you live in a town where it's all nicely digitized, but that is rare, right? So what happens? You've got to do a title search. You're going to buy a house. All this work has to be done to make sure that, in fact, the person who says they're the owner really is the owner. They can really sell it to you, and there is nothing impeding that sale, okay? It takes time. How many times have any of us been buying something and you're hung up waiting for the title, you know, to pass? And you've got to buy title insurance to make sure that the analysis was done correctly. And the purchase then can move forward. So that's the world today. But think about this, right? In a blockchain sort of environment, in a blockchain environment, that information about successive ownership, about tax payments, about mortgage and things like that is held in the blockchain and basically just sits one on top of the other on top of the other. So if a sale's going to take place, there's one place to go. And all that past information has already been verified. You don't have to start at square one to do it. And you think about the time and the money that's in the process now that would no longer exist if, in fact, you know, all of that information was being kept in a blockchain environment. And there's a lot of implications for procurement organizations as businesses might move to blockchain in the future, okay? Think about it. If I know that a subassembly has gone from this company to this company to this company, and they've done certain things, and it's taken a certain amount of time, that chain of command is all resident in the blockchain. There's a certain amount of risk mitigation that's assured. Now, where does that help? Well, that helps a lot when you're dealing with food items or items that are perishable in some way, right? You may have heard about IBM and Walmart working together to manage the supply chain of pork, because they were having trouble with pork, not, you know, with issues in terms of a product degradation by the time it got to the consumer. And so the idea is to look at the transit, look at the temperatures with which things are stored, look at the length of time, look at the modes of transportation, the individuals who tested it to make sure the appropriate testing was done on time, and to basically increase the probability that what gets to the ultimate consumer is in fact a good product, okay? Now, you imagine all this stuff going back and forth, right, on a blockchain. You think about a contract that might be sitting in an environment, a supply chain that's being run on the blockchain. Well, you need some repository that says, that verifies this is what this supplier should get paid, right? These are the quantities that have been ordered, and this is what this supplier should get paid. So procurement individuals will need to be educating themselves on the kinds of specificity that needs to be in a contract in a blockchain environment. And there's actually more as we talk about some of the other digital transformation entities that tell you that contracts are going to become more and more important. You know, it's easy for all of us in doing a contract to agree on what the price is going in, but it will be important, you know, in these kinds of environments to make sure that you are adequately describing the situations under which the price can change. Maybe there are volume discounts, maybe there's an agreement that based on a certain model, the price can go up over time. So smart contracts are very important. I believe there is going to be a huge cost reduction opportunity in this. Think about that model of buying a house, right? And think about the money you spent and the time associated with that title insurance. Well, what if that's no longer required, right? What if in a banking situation, you go to buy something, you use a blockchain system to do it, and you're no longer using a credit card company as an intermediary? There's lots of places where costs can drop out, and we as procurement professionals need to be thinking about it and asking the questions to make sure that we capture the benefit from that and it all doesn't go somewhere else. Again, process improvement and data accuracy by putting all the data in one place. Now, you may be like me, sitting there saying, well, what good is all of this? Where does this make any sense? So here are some ideas, right? Does it matter in my business? Well, as I mentioned before, if you are in a business where you're involved with food, if you're involved with certain chemicals, if you're in the alcoholic beverage, Bailey's Irish Cream has a very short shelf life. Those kinds of environments are good, or those kinds of products, it's good to look at what's being developed in the blockchain, because there's a lot being done primarily by IBM, although certainly by other companies, but their name pops up over and over again, as a leader there, to see whether there's some applicability for your business, or if not today, then someday. Things that are very complex, right? Where there are a lot of parts coming together, like I mentioned before, relative to the parts assembly and the sub-assemblies and things. Keeping track of what's where is important. I was doing some work a few months ago with some companies that were re-engineering what they were ordering in order to deal with tariffs. So rather than buy materials, goods from countries that had high tariffs now with the United States, they were doing a lot of re-engineering, and in some cases making the sub-assemblies and things more complex, but doing it for some good tariff related reasons. So blockchain may very well be a good place to be keeping track of things like that. Real estate. So I spent a lot of time in the real estate business, and I gave you the example of buying and selling because I think it's a very tangible example that touches many of us that we can wrap our heads around. But there are all kinds of blockchain experiments going on. One in particular, some guys in Brooklyn who are creating these investment vehicles where they're taking apartment buildings, and for people who might be interested in investing in real estate but don't have enough money to buy an apartment of their own, creating fractional shares and keeping track of it and using blockchain technology to keep track of it all. I say watch this space, banking, because I really believe that with this technology, these credit card intermediaries, the P card intermediaries, are going to go away effectively, or certainly going to have their costs reduced dramatically once the transition of getting from their current technologies to blockchain is done. So you ought to be thinking about that, a few years from now, 2 years from now, when you're thinking about, I've got some cost savings goals to make, where might they be? I'd be thinking about all of those fees and those banking fees that you're paying for, okay? So that's it, we take a break. That's a high level view on blockchain and what's going on there. Artificial intelligence, AI, right? I really love this one because this one is one where there is real tangible stuff for you all today to be looking at. Blockchain may not be ready for your environment, but AI, it certainly is. And I'll get to that, right? So the whole notion of artificial intelligence is You know, computers can think like people. They can adjust to new inputs. They can learn and do better based on the experiences they have, and they can improve over time. And today, AI is programmed by humans. I know there is a lot being written about the ultimate machines that self-program and take over the world. And you know what? That may be a problem, but that will be a problem for someone in a different presentation to answer a number of years from now. Right now, we're dealing with a world where the programming is being done by human beings. And you know, you hear about you know, Alexa, you hear about, you know, the various streaming services. Pandora gets smarter. It learns what you like in terms of music, and it suggests things, you know, according to a profile. In fact, I read that Pandora takes 400, they look at 400 different factors as you make decisions about the kinds of channels you want to see and the kinds of music you like and dislike, in order to try to narrow down to find the music that you're really going to like. And AI, and of course, self-driving cars. AI is a tool that kind of propels all of that. Okay? Now, in a traditional computer program, the program is defined and it operates within the defined boundaries, right? So Microsoft works within boundaries, and those boundaries are there and they only get changed when there's an upgrade. So if your computer's working, it's going to work, and it's going to work the same way all the time, right? Artificial intelligence is trained for something very specific, but the more input it gets over time, the better the result is, right? So big example, facial recognition, right? It gets trained to recognize, you know, not just that there is a human being there, but certain characteristics about the shape of your nose, the shape of your chin, and that kind of thing. And it starts to narrow in on defining myself versus Jeffrey versus Kathy, etc. Okay. Now, I've been playing with this graphic, and I really love this graphic in terms of trying to explain sort of how this works. When you're dealing with AI, you have a lot of computing power on a single task or a single set of tasks. It's very narrowly defined. We as humans don't have as much power, right? We don't have the computing power that a computer's got, but we can handle many more tasks, right? And you would need to handle the kinds of tasks we do in the course of the day. You would need many different AI applications to do that. It wouldn't be a single AI application that is suddenly there, kind of making all of the decisions and doing all the kinds of tasks that you do in the course of the day. Machine learning is a subset of artificial intelligence, and you know, it focuses on patterns, the ability to automatically learn. I think I've covered some of that. They take big data and process it like you process in the human brain. The example I gave before is correct in that Netflix, you know, Pandora, Netflix, those kinds of services take all the data, they process it quickly, they find the patterns that you are exhibiting, analyze it, and keep getting better and better, right? Although, I don't know, I watched a movie a couple of days ago that was out of my normal genre. You know, I was trying to change it up a little bit. And right now, Netflix does not know what to do. They don't know what to do with me. I'm getting all kinds of suggestions. I'm going to have to kind of rejigger my account somehow. Okay, machine learning is a subset of AI, but then there's deep learning, and that's a subset of machine learning, right? And that's really mimicking even closer what goes on in the human brain. It is the most advanced analytics. And as in the example I gave you before, it is the way artificial intelligence might assist a surgeon, right? It might be used in a robot that's being used in a complex surgery, where everything is so minute, it's difficult for the human eye to pick up. Or again, you know, the examples about facial recognition and things like that, right? You know, machine learning's telling you, you know, is watching your patterns and telling you what to do. Deep learning is, or what you might want to do, deep learning is getting a whole new level of complexity. Okay. So, will it work in my business? And when will it work in my business? And my somewhat scientific response is, yeah, and it works today. There's a lot of AI that's very workable for your businesses as they exist now. Not very expensive, right? You're not talking about the kind of prices that a hospital might be spending on a robot to do surgery. There are a lot of very inexpensive AI applications out there. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples of where it might make sense for you as a procurement professional. Okay, so AI at work. Okay, complex analytics. Watson, the IBM comes up again. That wasn't IBM. I'm not on IBM's payroll, but another example. They're doing work with the Department of Defense, right? The Department of Defense procurement manual is over 1,000 pages long. It's really complex. So they're working together to find out how to use AI to make sure that they're getting the right kind of outcome when they're out searching for suppliers, because the level of complexity in terms of the requirements that have to be met, both on the supplier side and on the side of the agency, is a lot for an individual to do on their own. Okay, supplier search and vetting, right? How many times have you gone out to find a supplier and discovered that the supplier isn't right? You know, you hear that the supplier is good and you go in and you realize that there is either a specialty of theirs, or there is some nuance in terms of what you are buying, or they're doing a great marketing job, but in fact, their clients, their existing customers, have issues with their service or their quality and things. So there are tools, there are lots of tools. I'm going to give you some suggestions at the end for supplier search and vetting, that use AI. Okay. Greater automation of menial procurement tasks, right? Using the digital assistant. So TradeShift, which is a company now that focuses a lot on, they're P2P, but their real sweet spot is accounts payable. And they're experimenting with a product called Ada, which is one where you can just use a chatbot to order certain things. And I don't know if any of you were watching on the web, but recently, prior to the Sprint and T-Mobile merger, the Sprint team created a digital lab and was focused on digitizing their procurement function using the brain power and the capabilities of their suppliers. And their former CPO had a very quick, like 5-second video on LinkedIn where he showed the use of Alexa for office supplies. They had worked with their office supplies provider to set it up so that certain categories could just be verbally ordered. Spend classification, right? There's a woman in the UK right now, Susan Walsh is her name, who's doing work. She didn't create the AI product, but she is somebody who cleans up spend classification messes. And she and I had a conversation recently, and she explained how she was using some AI products to enable her to do that as well. You think about it, someone going out or a piece of software that works with a number of companies is gonna know over time that supplier X might be categorized in a certain way, but actually has some other divisions or some other capabilities where they can do things that match with you. And think about how much time we've spent, all of us, over the years in terms of trying to classify suppliers. Supply chain, right? A lot on that end-to-end visibility, across the supply chain, understanding more about the risk management options here. And I think that coming out of this COVID-19 crisis, many of us, if you step back and say, well, have we looked at the worst or the best risk mitigation situation, or were we in the optimum cost situation? And I believe that companies are going to wind up somewhere in the middle going forward, and AI risk management solutions can help you analyze a lot more than you or I could ever analyze. We tended to divert to all one way or all the other way, and the right answer might be somewhere in the middle. All right. Lots of applications in finance today, and these are today legitimate products that are out there, right? You know, you will hear about machine trading, right? When the stock market goes crazy because the algorithms are telling, you know, the machines at the brokerage houses to buy or sell. But even things like, you know, looking at more factors on underwriting so that someone who maybe has a less, you know, standard credit history, who might fail in their bid to get a mortgage based on conventional means can, you know, if the bank is using an AI type solution, they'll look at more factors, okay? And sales using AI applications to identify leads and target those leads. In fact, if you all get a few minutes while you're home and go to the salesforce.com website, they have a great little couple-minute video that talks about how their product uses AI to help, you know, a lot of the elements that I'm talking about in here. So it gives you a good idea of how things are all put together. Now, I'm going to talk about what that means to you at the very end. So please bear with me while I go through the next set of slides, and then we'll tie it all up, hopefully in a nice, neat bow. Robotics, process information. So the engineer in me adores this one, right? So RPA is not an assembly line. It is not a robot or a series of robots that are assembling a car, a computer, whatever. That's not what it is. RPA is effectively an assembly of data. It's a movement of data, not of physical parts, right? So these kinds of robots, the traditional robots, are alive and well, right? But in the RPA case, they're taking software, adding AI, adding some machine learning, and focused on high volume, repeatable kinds of tasks that traditionally have been done by human beings. So I'll get into a little more example on that here. So what kinds of things might you use RPA for, right? So banks, financial institutions, insurance companies, any business that has people all day long filling out forms, right? They're signing up new customers, or existing customers are putting change of address together, right? And they're letting you know that they've moved. That information that gets filled out in the form has to get to a bunch of different places. And where in the past, you might have had people in an offshore environment looking at a screen and keying information into the right place, now you have robotics process information that can do that, right? Automated email responses. I ask for something and you know, the first thing that comes back to me is an automated response based on some of the keywords that were in the request I sent in back. And in companies that are big, like an LL Bean or something like that, you know, where you're getting thousands and thousands of those a day, the repetitive nature is one that might possibly be able to be done in an RPA situation. Data entry, right? Travel, right? Something that gets done repeatedly across the globe, like the cancellation of a ticket, right? When they tell you go online, you know, the call desk has a 5-hour waiting line. Go online, as you put it on in line, that cancellation is likely to be executed by a robot. A good friend of mine, Jeff Wallach, is a real expert in this space. And when I told him I was doing this, you know, and I said, well, what should I suggest to people in terms of where the best applications are for RPA? He said, right now, every basic accounting function where numbers are getting put in buckets, numbers are getting moved from, you know, one ledger to another, basically everything you write a check for, right? You need certain pieces of information to pay people in accounts payable or to send bills out in accounts receivable. That kind of thing can be done RPA, okay? Why do you do it? Well, there are classic reasons, right? Reducing error. If the machine's doing it, you're going to have a lot less human error. The machines can do it much faster. Allegedly, risk mitigation. Again, an error that might result in something bad happening, like somebody gets denied coverage when they shouldn't be. And cost. To me, again, with my engineer's hat and my procurement hat on, it's that cost one that is a very interesting one for us to keep our eyes on, okay? So in classic RPA, today, one robot equals the output of 4 people. So if you have a data entry center, classically, one robot can handle what 4 individuals can put out. And when you've taken into consideration the price, the cost of implementing the robot and running and servicing the robot versus the salaries of the individuals, you're talking about a 30 to a 45% cost reduction, in there, right? So that's something that we might not be top of mind to us, but we should be understanding what all of our suppliers are doing. Because if our suppliers, particularly those suppliers that are providing a service for us, as they automate, there's cost coming out that we might want to capture and bring. Okay. Couple more slides on RPA before I sort of pull it all together. You might not have enough volume to make sense to put an RPA application in place, but that's okay, because there are service providers who would take yours and those of other people and effectively give you an RPA timeshare, right? You don't have to have, you can buy a license and your company can do RPA on its own internally. Someone like American Express, who's got lots and lots and lots of transactions coming through, maybe for them, this is a good place for an RPA application. But if you're a much smaller firm, you can go to someone who handles RPA applications for other companies, and they would take your volume and others, and suddenly they've got robots working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, okay? So think about what this means. At some point, the companies we worked for outsourced to low labor centers, right? Those entities are likely replacing some of those people with RPA, right? So that means where you might think that you have a pricing model based on a certain number of people working on servicing your account, that may no longer be the case. That pricing model that you have in place and the full-time, the FTE model may no longer be valid. And I believe that is a great place to look, to ask those questions and to understand whether you might have a model in your contract that talks about price increases based on the cost of labor in a certain country or whatever. Well, that's not valid anymore if in fact that labor doesn't exist any longer and has been replaced by a robot, right? You also have a problem because in many of the outsourced arrangements, there are local subsidies available to the companies that have set up shop there, where they're getting subsidized on their ability to hire people. And what kind of agreements does your supplier have in place, and how is that going to affect you if you want them to roboticize a process and they have a commitment to have X number of individuals at work? It starts to get complex, and it may be places that are not top of mind, right? And there's effectively here, conceivably, a decreased benefit to outsourcing, right? So maybe those individuals are no longer sitting in a low-cost area, but if they are machines, maybe they're sitting a lot closer to home. And I suggest this to you, thinking about the post-COVID environment. Everybody's focused right now on PPE, on doing what you need to do to keep your business running. But as things start to settle out and life starts to become more normal, I really believe that procurement organizations who have done an incredible job in helping their companies in the COVID environment are going to be asked to get creative in terms of ways to reduce costs going forward because of all the losses that the companies are experiencing now. So I think that there is some great opportunity here, right? So question, how do I make this work? And I know I'm getting to the end of my time, but hopefully I'll be able to wrap this up in a couple of minutes. So this is Joanna's take on how to put this all together, right? We've got the source to pay chevron that we all love and adore, right? The different steps in the process that we follow. Now, you could do this for your sales organization. You could do this for your manufacturing, your transportation, your supply, your supply chain as a whole. Cut it however you want. But in this particular sourcing scenario, I would suggest that different tools show up in different places, right? And that in the case of robotics, I would look and I would focus potentially on robotics applications where there is a lot of data, a lot of the same data flowing back and forth, as I said before. Repetitive processes, maybe it's not even showing up on your procurement chevron, maybe it's somewhere else in the sales organization. Things you can measure in terms of numbers of units and how many FTEs you have supporting those units. Things that might already be out at a third party. And don't forget, in fact, that you can timeshare. You are unlikely to use robotic process automation in supplier identification and in outlining your requirements. But that's the piece of the chevron that you would use it in. When it comes to artificial intelligence, right? You can go big with AI, but I am aware that all of you in companies that have made investments in big tools, big end-to-end ERP systems, are unlikely to be in a financial situation anytime soon to change that around and say, oh, I've got a better one. I've got a better tool, given how embedded they are in finance and human resources. But a lot of people are using AI in very targeted point solution that can help you where your gap is. So if you look at those earlier steps of your chevron, identifying suppliers, understanding your requirements, developing strategies, going through the bidding process. In fact, there might very well be, and this is the name of a couple of companies that use AI. It is not meant to be all inclusive. In fact, I'm going to try next time I do the slide to add a whole bunch more, because I don't want anybody to think I'm telling you you've got to go this way versus another way. But there are companies out there today in supplier discovery, in spend categorization, in analyzing what back office equipment you should have where, in conducting RFPs that use AI that don't cost very much money. And right now, many of them have done things to help companies source in the midst of this pandemic, right? They are allowing the use of their products for free. They are using their subject matter experts to help clients and potential clients. They're getting user groups together focused around different types of materials that companies are looking for. So look for them. And if you need help, or you're in a situation where you want to try, they're going to let you try. They're going to let you give it a shot and vet it and give you a chance to see how it might work for your organization. And in the past, you might be able to get one or two do it. I see a whole lot more doing that. So I would suggest that if your workload allows, anywhere during this duration, it's a good idea to educate yourself here, okay? And with blockchain, I think right now it's not well enough developed for most of the businesses you're in. And so I would suggest that keep your eye on the space. You know, listen to a webinar every now and then, but you will get the biggest bang for your buck today, looking at the point applications that use artificial intelligence and looking at opportunities to use robotics. So that's it. I think we've done, we're virtually exactly at 40 minutes. If you have questions, first of all, if you think there's a gap, gee, I didn't talk about something else that you think is important, let me know. Anything you disagree with, anything that resonates, any questions, please feel free to just go to me on LinkedIn. I think Jeffrey knows that whenever I speak to groups, I try to make myself available to people afterwards to just brainstorm and chat. So,
Joanna, we do have one question, and
sure.
we have about another 10 minutes. So if anybody else has questions, please use the Q&A box at the bottom.
And Jeffrey, I don't, because I have a call at 5. So I've got about maybe 5 more minutes. So.
Okay, 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So the question is regarding the investment in AI/RPA from the vendor. There is often additional upfront costs to realize savings later. Do you see value in the investment? And what are your thoughts in contracting with expected outcomes in mind? Are there any clawbacks sensible here?
Well, you know, I think so, yes. And, you know, think about it. Your supplier is not doing this just for you. They're doing it across their entire base of clients, right? Because you know, someone who is doing data entry, taking information from an application, you know, for an insurance company, their other clients are going to be other insurance companies. So you need to make sure that you're not allowing a supplier to imply that they're doing this just for you. That in fact, they are spreading that cost over a whole bunch of different people. And so you want to make sure that you're not bearing an upfront cost, and you should expect the cost to go down over time. You know, there are various statistics. There are so many different statistics I've read that I feel like I have to do a bit more research before I start quoting any numbers. But certainly the speed is going up, the price is coming down, and therefore, you know, you should definitely be looking to harvest advantage of that. And if you've got a good supplier relationship and you're convinced that they're making an investment, well, maybe you don't need it all up front. Maybe as a, you know, in terms of relationship management, you know, you'll give them a year or some time before you look to see those benefits come to them. Anything else?
Sorry about that. Anyone else have any questions before Joanna takes leave of us? Now, I know this is not a shy group, and there are 48 of you out there. Well, make note on the screen of Joanna's contact information. As I mentioned, her book is a good read. Joanna, thank you for joining us today, and stay safe. And as my wife says, stay sane throughout these strange times.
Well, thank you, everybody, very much.
Thank you all for attending today's program. We will be emailing out a survey and your CEH credits. Our next virtual meeting will be on June 18th, and the topic will be change management, the oft-forgotten human component of project success. Everyone stay safe and healthy, and have a great rest of your day.